Thank you everyone for joining today. This is our second episode of our webinar series in the Deep with PPC. This time I have the pleasure of sharing this virtual stage with Mauricio Orantes, who works for the Microsoft advertising team. Mauricio, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's like we're in the same office or something.
Yes, kudos to the team for the beautiful background we have. Mauricio has shared the stage with me a couple of times. The past couple of years, we've been to some events together talking about the digital marketing world and the Microsoft opportunities. Today, we're going to be talking about a particular subject that we hear a lot from starting agencies, especially agencies that don't have too much background in paid media and advertising channels and funnels with their customers, right? This particular topic is a topic I enjoy a lot. I've talked about this a lot, and it's an evolving subject. If we had done this webinar 2 years ago, probably the content would have been completely different because there's a lot of things that are changing, especially after 2020 and what we went through with the pandemic. But basically what we're going to be covering today is a process that develops more engagement with your product and just a closer look into the client journey, how this client journey can represent the right foundation, and understanding the client journey can represent the right foundation for your marketing strategy, and understanding how a multi-channel approach can actually enhance this particular strategy. So we're going to be starting with the client journey, understanding the onboarding phases of a client journey and each one of the stages and what each one of them means, and the recommendations we have for some of the actions that you should be taking at these stages if you want to secure more successful campaigns and a more successful multi-channel approach, right? Then we're going to be covering the value of having multi-channel marketing, what this means in terms of behavior and how this adds flexibility to your strategy, the benefits of implementing this and some best practices, and also tying this to some of the challenges that we've seen from some of the partners that we work with and some of the partners that we talk to in terms of having the best strategy to generate results with their clients and also for themselves and how they acquire customers in the long run. So we're going to get started with the client journey. We're going to have a Q&A session closer to the end of the presentation, but if you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat as well. And if they tie together to the content at that point in time, we're going to address them. If not, we're going to leave them to the end and then we're going to cover them. So feel free to add them there. So to get started, let's talk a bit about the client journey and what this is and what this means. If you talk about client journey and you talk about decision-making process for customers, we have to talk a multi-touch point approach, and we have to talk about all the steps that a customer goes through to make a purchasing decision, whether it's a service or a product. Nowadays, customers have to go through different steps in order to acquire a product. If we did the same exercise 10 years ago or 20 years ago, maybe we would be talking about 2 or 3 steps that a customer would take to actually hire a service or purchase something if they did it online or in person. But nowadays, we're seeing many more touch points through the funnel because of the resources and access to information that customers have. What this means is that most funnels for most products are now longer. They take longer to make decisions, and they actually look for more information before making a decision. The funnel actually starts with the awareness stage, which is when customers are faced with a particular solution that maybe they didn't know they needed or they didn't know existed. In a lot of cases, a lot of customers don't necessarily buy a product out of an existing need, but rather something that comes to them and helps them understand that a particular product or service could help them improve a solution that maybe they didn't think about. We've all been there. We've all been exposed to maybe some sort of display advertising or remarketing where we see a product that maybe we weren't thinking of buying, but somehow with the magic of digital advertising, it connects to some of our needs and something that we're looking for, right? And this is how the funnel starts, with us understanding that something exists and that we're aware that that brand is there and could potentially offer a solution for a particular problem or situation that we need to tackle. Once we cover the awareness stage, and we're going to go in detail into these ones, we go into the consideration stage, which is when a potential customer actually dives in and says, okay, I found something that could be interesting. Now let me browse around and understand what I need to know in order to actually purchase this product. So what type of problem is this going to solve? What are the alternatives for this particular solution? What can I learn more about the product in order to acquire the solution and make it more efficient? After this particular stage, we go into the purchase stage, which is in the conversion or transaction happens. This is when your customer will actually hire you to do the service or buy your product and will actually put the money down to obtain something in return. Most stages and most funnels nowadays only focus on this initial stages, which are the pre-sale stages, right? They talk about what you need to do to acquire the customer, but a lot of them forget about what happens after the customer pays or hires your service. And this is a continuation of the client journey because they're still going to be your client and they're just as important as the initial stages, right? And we talk about retention and advocacy. Retention being the moment when your client becomes a client and you're actually just constantly trying to retain this client but offer added value. And then the advocacy stage where most of your clients can actually become your main source of revenue increase or lead generation, because a happy customer can actually expand your network and probably provide you with referrals, with upsells, with cross-sells, and all the opportunities that are out there that a lot of agencies are actually not capitalizing on. So if you split them into two, you have two very clear moments. You have the pre-sale moment and the post-sale moment. Pre-sale requires a particular approach and maybe a particular combination of channels of marketing, and post-sale requires a different approach and a different combination because you're actually providing different things. In the pre-sale stage, you're trying to showcase information. You're trying to provide as clear as possible an added value that you can bring to your customer and to your clients. And then in the post-sale stage, it's all about giving them added value at that particular moment and making sure that you're living to the expectations that you provided. So having this differentiation is very important when you want to talk about multi-channel marketing, because this is what's going to define the right combination of channels that you want to bring on board to make sure you tackle each one of the stages. When you want to tackle something like awareness or consideration, you might not necessarily use the same channels that you would use if you want to talk about a retention strategy or building an advocacy program or building a loyalty program for your customers to increase revenue. So understanding this funnel and understanding each one of the stages, it's what's going to help you actually set the foundation for a multi-channel marketing approach, right? Before jumping into details into each one of them, I think in terms of importance, you have to keep in mind that each one of the stages has its own importance. It's very common to hear that the most important stage for most people can be the consideration stage because this is when decision-making happens. That's not necessarily the case. And actually capturing one moment doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to capture a successful client or that the relationship is going to be successful. I know Mauricio has a lot of experience in this because we've talked about this particular subject. And we've talked a lot about the fact that if you don't see the whole picture and you're not on top of the entire picture and the entire approach, you might miss key points, which might not affect the sale. So you might actually end up closing a client, you might bring them on board, but the lifetime value is going to be different, or the opportunity that you're going to have to grow them is going to be different, or even getting a referral from them or a testimonial or even a good review is going to be completely different because you're not paying attention to all the signals that you should. To cover each one of them in detail and talk a bit about more some of the things that you should look out for in each one of the stages, I'm going to start with awareness. This is, like I mentioned, the discover stage. This is when a client will either realize that they have a pain point or actually identify something that could be a solution for a potential pain point that they've had, but they haven't actually looked for a solution in the past, right? Sometimes we have a particular issue at home. We need to fix something at home, but it's not that important for us at that point in time. So we're not actively looking for a solution. But then all of a sudden we come across an ad or somewhere along the line, we see something that catches our eye and say, okay, you know what? This is the solution to a problem I had. Might not be an urgent problem. If I hadn't seen this, maybe I wouldn't have thought about the solution. But now that I have it in front, it's an easy way to find a solution for a particular program. So all of that happens in the awareness stage. And this is one of the most important stages in terms of being present and having a good branded approach. This is where your brand needs to come in because this is usually the first interaction that a client has with what you have to offer and who you are. As an agency, if you're capturing customers, or if you're talking about managing a campaign for a client, the added value of that client. So if you're going to see an ad and you're going to invest in being the first touch point and being there when a customer is not necessarily looking for you, you have to make sure that you're providing the right information, precise, concise, but also clear-cut added value of what you offer and a specific idea of the problem that you can solve for the customer as well, right? A lot has to go into the messaging and the marketing messaging for this particular stage, and it can be tied to different channels. This is a great opportunity to start working and putting out their content in terms of blog posts, social media blog posts, doing webinars like these ones where maybe you're interacting with people that hadn't come across your content, and also providing kit videos and any other extra content that you can provide that brings added value that acts as the first touch point with a potential brand or a potential customer. The second stage that we discussed earlier in the webinar is the consideration stage. This is where if your brand made an impact, you're going to be a candidate for a potential purchase or for delivering a service for your customer, right? This is where a client is going to be comparing you with somebody else in terms of pricing, in terms of efficiency, in terms of features and benefits that you provide, which means that this is the stage where you need to highlight the unique selling propositions. This is where you need to show what makes you different from the competition. If you're offering a product, let's say you're offering a camera, you're selling cameras. Why is your camera different? Why is your phone different? What makes you different from the rest? Whether it's pricing, whether it's the value of the product, whether it's the features that you can do that the other ones can't do, or maybe your loyalty program, customer service, which nowadays is just as important. You might be selling the exact same product as somebody else. If you're a retail store and you're selling furniture or you're selling electronics, you might be selling the same phone or the same bed as your competitor. So your highlight and your added value is not necessarily going to be the product itself. It might be pricing, it might be a coupon, but it could also be your buying experience. You can easily buy the product on your website. You have a great customer experience. You have a pretty decent return policy. You allow customers to try it in advance. You have a lot of features that maybe competitors don't have. This is the moment in time where you want to highlight them, because this is the moment in time where a potential customer is going to compare you with everybody else. If you're an agency and you're actually offering advertising services, so you want to capture a client and you want to manage their campaigns, you probably know by now that you're going to compete with thousands of other agencies out there, especially if you're going national, but even local, you're going to compete with hundreds of agencies out there offering the same service. So how do you capture a client and how do you offer something that's going to help you stand out? Pricing can come in handy, and you can try an aggressive pricing strategy, but there is only so much you're going to be able to do there. In our experience, transparency comes a big way. If you're talking to a customer in a digital marketing strategy, we highlight that a lot as an added value when we talk to our customers. Say, hey, one of the things that we're going to give you that you're not necessarily going to find everywhere else is transparency. We're very transparent about results, about your account, about your information, about privacy, and about what we're doing for you. That's something you can highlight. Another thing you can highlight, communication. How often are you going to be talking to my team? How available am I going to be to actually help you if you have any issues, or to talk about your strategy? How involved are you going to be in terms of feedback and understanding and helping us understand your product as well, right? So these are all things that you can take into consideration if you're talking about putting your services out there as an agency, or if you're talking about your customers and them just jumping into the market and trying to highlight some of the unique selling propositions, right? Then the next stage that we have in the pipeline is the purchase stage. This is when the transaction is going to happen. This is when your client converts. This is obviously an extremely important stage, but this is also probably the most delicate stage. From previous experience, I can tell you that if you have a customer engaged and ready to go, and somewhere along the line during the onboarding process or during the sign-up process, they face a roadblock, you might lose the entire sale and you might lose the opportunity to ever get that customer in the future. So if you're talking about making a journey as easy as possible for a potential customer, you have to be present during the purchase stage. But the most important thing is to make sure that the experience that the customer is going to have during this stage is flawless. So if you're talking about selling a product, you want to make sure that if you're selling it online, a customer doesn't have to go through 25 steps to purchase your product. You have to make the purchase path easy. You have to provide the right information. A good practice would be that once they purchase the product, you send a follow-up email with a summary of their purchase, conditions, details, next steps, in order to make sure that this particular stage sets the foundation for the relationship, because this is when you start servicing your product. And if you get a customer and service goes down on month one, then what you're going to have, apart from churn, is this is not going to make financial sense for you. Most agencies require customers to stay around for at least 4, 5, 6 months in order to have some sort of profit from the relationship. And this is the moment where you're going to be able to guarantee that whether you have a contract or not, this is the moment where you secure that the customer starts with the right foot and they start the relationship as, or at least tied to the expectations that you set during your awareness stage and during your consideration stage, right? This is the moment, for instance, if you have a new product where you can give a free trial, you can give a demo, if you can give a coupon for them to start advertising on a particular channel, if you can offer some sort of added value from the get-go, this sets the right foundation for your customers, and it's going to help them stay longer and probably refer and grow together with you as well. Then the trickiest one of them all, it's the retention stage, right? You got your customers, you caught them with your awareness strategy, you caught them with your branding strategy. They chose you in the consideration stage over other partners and other agencies and other potential competitors that you had. They went through the purchase stage. It was all great. They were able to sign up. The onboarding experience was flawless. Now they're a customer. Now they enter the retention stage. We call it the retention stage because this is literally the moment in time where you're going to be retaining your client, probably on a monthly basis. Every single month, you have to deliver a service that guarantees that the client will stay around. This means that you have to help your client navigate your product. You have to keep them engaged. You have to cater your strategy and your product so that they feel that they're getting the added value that they were sold on, and so that you develop loyalty with them. Communication is probably the most important factor here. And this is also a very important stage where you need to consider different channels to keep them engaged. For instance, if you want to invest in a channel where you can market a customer survey strategy and you develop a CSAT strategy to be on top of client satisfaction, this is the right stage to do it, right when they begin the relationship with you and while they're actually receiving the service or the product from you. This is where you're going to set the stage for a potential cross-sell, upsell, or even referral opportunity. So as long as you're delivering the service that you said you were going to deliver, you're providing added value, and you have a great customer service, you're going to be able to grow your clients, and the lifetime value for these particular clients is going to be much higher as well. So this is one of the most important stages as well. This is probably going to be the longest stage as well if you do your job and you're able to cater to the client's needs. So this is the one that you're going to have to focus on to be creative and try to understand how to take it to the next level to keep the client on board, right? If you've done everything right so far, you're going to jump into the advocacy stage. This is the point in time, and this is one of the stages of the funnel that most agencies don't pay attention to. And it can be a great source of revenue, content, and just the overall sense of loyalty that you get from your customers. If you've done everything right and you have a happy customer, that customer is more than likely to refer you to someone else. If you've ever worked in sales and you've ever gotten a referral lead, you're going to know that these leads are probably the hottest leads that you can get, because the referrals come with the best expectation possible and they come recommended from someone that they trust. So having this available is extremely important for a revenue growth strategy and also for a marketing and branding strategy. The more testimonials, reviews, and just overall communication that you can get from your customers, the more successful you're going to be closing any new customers that come down the line. So investing time and resources on this particular stage is extremely important, because this is a huge revenue opportunity that most agencies are missing out on. If you don't have a solid referral campaign from your existing customers, this is the time to do it, especially post-pandemic, because this is the moment where you're going to need to rely on different sources of revenue to make sure that you're able to capitalize on your existing customer portfolio and also the revenue opportunities that are available there. I think we have a couple of questions here. So let me see if we can have them here. Okay, I think they were answered already in the chat. If any else comes up, we're going to leave them towards the end. But yes, we're going to be sharing the recording of this presentation. Perfect. So now that we've covered the client journey and we've talked about all the stages and how clients make decisions, now we can talk about multi-marketing channel approach. What does this mean? What does it mean to have different channels, and why do you want to target different channels? Well, if you have different stages and you know for a fact that customers take more time and look deeper into things to make decisions, you have to be present in all those stages if you want to be successful with your marketing strategy, right? So I'm going to let Mauricio walk us through this particular part of the presentation. Again, this is something we've covered in the past, but with 2020, there are a lot of things that have changed that we hadn't covered before that might be surprising for you as well as you see them. So Mauricio, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And I was on mute mostly because, you know, you're preaching the truth, and I really enjoy the flow of you know, basically what is the importance of every stage of, you know, the sales process, maintaining a really important relationship with your client, nurturing that, and then continuing to sort of rinse, repeat. And I think it's awesome that, again, we're able to highlight each important part of that flow, right? Is the differentiator for your agency, right? Like, what is your lemon twist? Do you want to service everyone, or do you want to service a specific vertical, right? And I think it's super important that you, as an agency, determine that that focus, right? Because that's going to speak to the end advertiser, right? Someone who's searching to market, to get their business off the ground, to do what they can't do, they're going to look for something specific. And so I think that's massively important here. And, you know, translating that to the client's message, right? So once I, as the advertiser, have, you know, basically entrusted my hard-earned money to the agency who is speaking, who I identify with their value proposition, you know, what can you do for me at that point to really like execute on the success of my business, and then us reinforce that relationship, and then me being happy 6 months, 8 months, 12 months down the line, how do I start advocating for you at the end of the day? Because, you know, what you delivered for me, I can, you know, share with my network. So the value at the very high level, right? Like where we are 2021, you know, I think it's literally everyone has celebrated their 1-year anniversary of being in some kind of quarantine in their country, in their respective state, in their respective city. Personally, what I've seen is that there's a lot of folks who aren't going into the office and they're staying at home. What that's done is staying at home has actually increased the amount of connected devices that they have to the net, to the internet, and that's most likely in the form of a work PC. And so we brought home work, and work is home. And so in a lot of ways, in the past, we were able to make that break from work and personal life, right? And so when it comes to people looking at their work and researching at work, they're researching at home, and they're researching likely on a PC, or they're likely out on a work machine, right? And so the idea now is that it's super important for all of us to start looking at omnichannel as the next, as not just like the next thing to look forward to, as what we need to employ today, right? And so how do we start tinkering that in the future? That's going to be something for another conversation. But the idea right now is you have to be present where everyone's researching, right? Because they're bouncing back between their cell phone, their tablet, their home PC, and their work PC. So how do you sort of make sure that you have a strategy behind that? You have to do the research. You have to look at all the publishers that are presenting your advertising in those devices. Who's not doing it? Who's doing it? How do you get your ad into to play into that marketplace? And so all these things are really important. And so it can be very overwhelming right now for any agency to do that research themselves. So I'm glad that I was able to participate in such a forum here with White Shark, who's helping to distill some of that information down for you. So all things considered, what I'm saying is we're hyper connected. We're going to be even more connected. The technology now is speaking to other forms of devices in your home. And so we want to make sure that we're leveraging what makes the most sense for your end advertiser, and that you're delivering on that sort of executable path for them. So what we want to do is make sure that we're focused on an integrated user experience. And so again, one message does not fit all, right? And so we want to make sure that folks are leveraging the right message, the right time, you know, in the right device, right? And so a lot of times, what we were seeing maybe 2 years ago, specifically with automotive side, is that the manufacturers were a bit more complexity for the marketers because they had more sort of makes and models with new small twists that we had to account for. We had to make sure that we could provide enough platforms for folks to deliver this message on, right? And so now what we're seeing is that we can create hubs, the same kind of consistent messaging across all devices. And we just want to make it easy for the person searching for this type of product to look through what they're looking for and be able to tease through some of that. So we want to make sure that you have the right tracking on your websites. So when someone lands on your website from their tablet, that, you know, you look at the query that they're coming in from, they're searching for a specific type of safety for their car, or a particular type of, I don't know, home service that they're in the consideration phase. Like, what is the cheapest electrician in my neighborhood? Or who is, how do I start this project to, you know, update my deck at home, right? And so you have to be present for the sort of top funnel places, and you have to look at the kind of devices that they're searching on, and then also be able to, again, be consistent with creating an easy flow for them to connect with someone on the other end, either maybe make it a phone call or have them fill out a form with their information and make it as easy as possible and follow up with them, right? And so as you start sort of ingesting all this data, you have to look at where they're coming from. And then at what point are they either leaving your website or are they coming to your website? And you start creating segmentations of audiences. This is how you start to qualify them, right? This is how you look at them to say like, hey, if they landed on my website and they said they're looking for a car dealership near me, it's likely that they want to go or are planning on visiting a dealership tomorrow or this weekend. So we need to make sure that we can segment to them the next time that they're searching a more detailed message, that we're providing them a location, that we're providing them either a price point for the make and model that they were either looking for, or the hours, at least, the very least, the hours of operation. The other side is also just making sure that, you know, you're maximizing sort of like that kind of messaging, and you're being mindful of the kind of price you're paying for on the kind of click, right? Because some people at the very top level are just considering. You may not want to pay, you know, the maximum dollar at all hours of the day, because they may not convert for you, you know, right away, right? They may just convert, you know, 30 days down the line. So it's a matter of looking at how people are coming to your website and how you can start segmenting those audiences, and then also start creating a unique strategy with messaging and pricing, you know, according to where they are in the path of conversion. And again, right? So being able to adapt, you know, your plan, right? Things aren't as straightforward. They're not linear the same way that they were maybe 6, 7 months ago, 9 months, a year ago, right? And so we have to make sure that we're understanding, we're listening to what the data is telling us, right? So how are people coming to your website? What terms are they sort of, at least from a paid search side, how are they coming through there, right? Like, are they qualifying themselves? Again, if they're considering one make versus another make, then they're considering, right? If they're looking at what hours is the nearest dealer open, that's a very qualified part of the funnel. So you have to be ready for that kind of messaging, and you have to be able to create ad copy, the right collateral, the right images that will speak to that kind of qualification of the query, of the kind of search that someone's doing, the kind of ad that they've clicked on. So we want to make sure that you have all these things to measure that kind of data set. And you want to make sure that at a very core level, if you run the websites, if you have an opportunity to influence the back end of that side, very basic, high level stuff. You don't want to miss this. Put tracking on all that stuff, right? You know, Google offers a tracking tool. Adobe has another tracking tool. You have partners like White Trick Media who have a very robust tool that can allow you to make some sense of that as well too. So it's all in one hub. But there's a ton of folks who are offering free tools, or at a small premium side, where, you know, you'll get a lot more analytics, but it, for one, it will give you an opportunity to start looking at how to make sense of all this data. And then when it comes to the different publishers you're working with, make sure you have those trackers on there. It just makes more sense, because you want to make sure what channel's delivering the right ROI for you. And, you know, this helps you dial up and dial down, and then learn about the audience, right? Like, how are they starting to behave? You know, from a very high level analytics perspective, what we've seen 2 years ago, in a perfect window, we saw that people who were searching for a car and purchased a car and drove it off the lot, perfect, it was 90 days. Why? Because they could consider at work, they could consider at home, they could consider on the weekends, at night, in the evening, and they could go anywhere they wanted, right? We didn't have to wear masks. We didn't have to live in a sort of world where we have a pandemic around us. Now, very different world. We're at home 99% of the time. And so people are searching on their machine. They're searching for very qualified aspects of a car, looking at their phone, they're watching TV, they're getting hit with ads. And now they know exactly what they're looking for, but by the time they walk onto the lot. And so that path to purchase is actually being crunched down to roughly around 30 days. So, you know, we're seeing people behave differently in how they're searching, and specifically with different verticals like home services, people are converting much faster. So if your ad says doesn't say act now and contact me here, or fill out this form, someone's going to get back to you, you're likely going to lose out to the person who does provide that messaging. So definitely make sure that you set yourself up to look and read the room, have the right message, understand that you have to be present everywhere people are searching or able to click, and then also keep in touch, have your hand on the pulse with folks like White Shark, with folks like myself who will post things that are relevant to the industry, folks at Google, folks at Facebook, and make sure that, you know, you're listening to what they're saying, because they are keeping their hand on the pulse, and they want to provide you with the best information. That's it. On the next side, being present, right? I know we've been focusing specific on digital, and digital is my world, but it's not lost on me that, again, right? Folks still advertise on radio, they still advertise on print, they still advertise on television. Those things aren't going away, but what we are seeing is that the investment for digital is only going to go up. Right. So, we're not saying people don't drive cars and tune into the radio. Like, we're not saying that at all. We're saying that the world is fluctuating. 20 years ago, if you weren't on TV, you were nowhere. If you weren't on radio, you were nowhere. Right. And so we were seeing the inversion of this. But again, technology is moving at a really accelerated rate, and we're only going to get more connected. And the idea is that all these different pieces that were king in the past or were dominant in the past, they're going to take on a different role, right? And so you have to evaluate that with your advertiser, with your business, and see like what makes the most sense, right? Because at the end of the day, we're only becoming more connected, or increasing the amount of devices that they have at home, that they have at work, and so all that's going to inform where you need to put your dollars, right? And so at the end of the day, it's really about listening to the industry and making sure that you're really going to the market. You're going to your end advertiser and informing them, in some cases, educating them that the way it was needs to adapt the way it's going to be in the near future. And some things are just going to be dialed up and some are going to be dialed down, but we're not saying don't dial them completely off, right? Because you have to be present wherever there's a path to purchase.
One thing I think it's important to highlight here is that when you talk about flexibility, and again, we're going to cover this later down the webinar, but when we talk about 2020 and some of the things that we learned, having a flexible strategy is what's going to allow you to make quick shifts if something happens with your audience or your buying funnel. So 2020 is the perfect example of something happening to your funnel, and having the ability to shift budgets, to shift strategy in the short term is key to success. If you're talking about traditional media versus digital, if you have a billboard on the road, it's going to be hard to shift that from one day to another if you need to make a change on your messaging, or your customers, or your decision funnel has changed, right? With digital, you don't have that issue. You can turn things off immediately. You can change ad copy immediately. And there is this sense of flexibility that you don't have with traditional media and traditional marketing. That's going to change how things go for you in times like the ones we have right now, where we're going through a pandemic and we're thinking of a new normal. So it's fundamental to understand that when you want to think about the balance of where your budget should go. We're not necessarily saying that you have to have all your budget on digital. Just understand the role of each one of the channels and the advantages that you have whenever you face situations like the one we did in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, we're going to tie a nice little bow on this, because at the end of the day, we have a lot more content to go through, but these are the benefits of multi-channel marketing, right? Performance, engagement, audience insights, cost effectiveness, right? It's really playing in all this space. We need to have the data to understand like what is the best optimal mix. You can't not be present on certain channels, right? There are certain places where we believe to be fundamental, right? Search is one of those. This is not a shameless plug, but most people will begin their path to search to purchase like on a search bar, right? But they're also going to be jumping around between their connected television. And you want to be present there with an ad there, right? Video is going to be super important as well too. YouTube's not the only place that allows this sort of place. Right. And so we're starting to see these formats to be adapted in different places. And at the end of the day, people want to also distract themselves with the content that's important to them. And so we need to be placing units that make sense to them, to their path to purchase there in the content that they're researching on. And then also, again, being able to dial up the areas that make the most sense. Right. And so some of the channels are going to make more sense for you. So you can dial that up, and then be able to sort of keep an eye on other parts of the funnel that are driving those folks through that path, and be flexible, right? That's ultimately what we want to make sure we can convey to you, right? Be flexible. Again, best practices for multi-channel marketing: establish goals, right? What is the goal? This is having a deep understanding of your end advertiser. One size does not fit all, right? And so as you understand what your focus is with your advertiser, making sure that they have that special attention from you, that they know that you know that phone calls are important to them, and so you establish that, right? And so making sure that that is what you want to deliver for them. You understand what the cost is for them to make that profitable, and you drive towards that, right? And so this way everyone's marching towards the same North Star, right? And so that's really a massive priority, right? So again, point of sale is critical. The points beyond that, ones that are going to be the most important for you, they're going to extend that lifetime value. They're going to feel connected to your brand. They're going to feel connected to your agency, and they're going to advocate for you in their social channels and in their social networks, right? And so that's super important. Prioritize the channels, right? Again, understanding what's important to them, what's going to drive and make sense for them. My dry cleaner definitely wants phone calls, definitely wants like search traffic, but they don't necessarily need to be on my connected television, right? So being able to provide that kind of sort of bring down to earth perspective to the end advertiser. They may have huge budgets, huge aspirations, but at the end of the day, some things aren't going to make sense for them. They're going to value your real approach to them to keep them sort of measured and grounded on like what is supposed to deliver for them, because they're trusting you, and you're going to reinforce that trust with that industry knowledge. Contextual relevance, delivering the right content to your audiences, right? So making sure you're leveraging the analytics that's available, making sure you're tracking everything that comes in, making sure that you're also looking at how people are behaving as they're landing on the site. Why aren't they converting? Being able to adjust for those kind of things. Is the messaging not right? Is the website not behaving correctly? Is that clunky, right? And so being able to fine tune some of those areas that create bumpiness along the road are definitely going to set you a cut above. And then again, right, looking at the market, staying on top of the industry news, right? Like there's a ton of websites there that focus on display, that focus on connected televisions, focus on how paid search is behaving, right? Like who's releasing what. And so just having those websites bookmarked for you is going to set you a cut above, because you're staying on top of what small changes are going to have massive impacts on the industry, or what big changes are going to impact your industry. So keep an eye on it. This is for you to sort of, again, hone in on what the differences that you bring to the table. And then automation tools, right? One last like plug here is that, again, as your business begins to scale, as you get to a point where your sort of performance as a business begins to speak for you, and you start growing your account base, we're going to have to look at automation, right? We have to understand that this is something that data informs a lot of that. And a lot of the publishers are starting to offer either free tools, or these things are already getting baked in, or they're starting to test these things. But you should start asking and looking into what automation can do for your business. It can either help you launch campaigns. It can either help you adjust for some flexibility in the marketplace, in the auctions as well. And so it's really important that we look at automation as a friend and not a foe. And it's something that, again, is going to allow you to scale and at every stage of your business as you continue to grow from a 10 client agency to a 25 client agency to 100 to 500. So I definitely want to make sure we can call that out.
One key factor there, Mauricio, I think it's, again, since we're going through times where a lot of unexpected changes are happening fast, automation is your best ally to make sense of that data, right? There's a lot of numbers that you won't be able to crunch manually, or things that you won't be able to understand if you try to do them yourself. And this is where the tools come into place. The decision-making, if you're managing campaigns, requires a lot more time and effort if you don't have the right tools. And if you're talking about a changing funnel, changing customer behavior, changing markets, it's going to take even 10 times more if you don't have the right tools. So leveraging automation to understand where the quick wins are, but also to understand the upcoming trends in the market is fundamental, especially when the markets are not stable. So finding the right balance is obviously extremely important. I don't think you can fully automate an entire process or an entire account management process, but you should definitely rely on automation to understand where the best opportunities are, and also to be obviously more efficient, because time is of the essence when you need to work with clients and when you need to navigate these waters that we're navigating now. So that's definitely important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, right, automation is a friend. I think it used to feel like a bad word in the past. We don't live in the world of Skynet, right? The idea is, again, we're not taking the human element out of it. it's really just to help create efficiencies, and they can work when you're not, right? Especially with a 24-hour workday, you have to rest. Some of these technologies are sort of working in the background. And with that said, marketing tools, right? Like some of the things that we've seen as companies begin to scale is that at a very early stage, if you are at like a 5-account stage in your business or a 10-account or even 20, 25, you can sort of get around some, paying for certain tools, right? That will help you ingest and make sense of all these, data points or account management points in one hub, right? We've seen people Frankenstein as they scale, right? But at the end of the day, email and Excel sheets and Google Docs you're going to outgrow those at one point, right? And so the idea here at this point is start looking at tools that can create, one-stop shops for you, right? These are going to be places where they're already plugging into some of the publishers, the big ones at least. And again, we're making massive investments to connect to every tool, whether they're the big off-the-shelf stuff or even the small guys, right? Because the idea is we need to make sure that we're understanding how the industry's moving, how they're behaving, what they're integrating to, and how to make you a better marketer, right? So the idea is not to hold this information back, it's to give you as much of it as possible, but also help you make sense of it. And again, it's something that you have to look at as an investment. It's going to help you grow your business, and again, it's going to help set you apart from the other guys, right? When your end advertiser asks you, "What am I really looking at?" I just have 30 seconds or a couple of minutes to dedicate to getting you the results. You want to be able to present something that's going to synthesize all their marketing channels into what matters to them most, right? And so presentation matters here in a lot of ways, and some marketing tools will help you do that off the bat. And so definitely look at it as an investment. Video marketing, even though it's considered it's effective, right? So this is super important. I touched on this minutes ago, but at the end of the day, I think in the past, we have to sort of shake that off, that it was a one-stop place where you would actually leverage some of these assets. We're starting to see this integration in a couple of different places. YouTube has allowed us to sort of leverage their assets. And now we can see that there's a couple of other offerings now that are going to be made available to you, like native, right? We can have native placements that are automatically going to place and play video, right? And so now you can start plugging in what makes sense across a larger publisher network. And so it's going to be super important that you start looking at that as part of your business, right? And the scalability of making these things is actually easier. There's editor tools that will allow you to sort of edit on your PC. Now you don't need these massive production studios. And there's a couple of things to do that make it easy, especially with placing a message and making it clickable. So a big push for us, we're starting to integrate that in the Microsoft level. So this is a shameless plug. I will say that on our network, we are starting to open up a couple of different areas. Our native offering is growing, and we are starting to make that a little robust. So video is one of those components that we're going to start allowing folks to leverage. By all means, feel free to connect with Francisco or myself to see how you can take advantage of those things. And before we move on to the last piece, training again, right? Continue to up-level yourself, continue to make your agency the difference in the marketplace. A lot of people can manage PPC. A lot of people can manage multi-channel. They can say they can get you on the Connect television. They can get you on a smartphone. They can get you on a tablet. But the difference is, how are you going to speak to me? How are you going to talk to me about some of this stuff? And how are you going to keep me competitive with the guy across the street or the guy across town? So this is the kind of thing that is going to allow you to sort of stay a cut above, right? Staying on top, keeping your hand on the pulse. So that's my 2 cents, and that's all I got to say.
Yeah, I think, Mauricio, in regards to video and going back to that particular point, video is a perfect example of a product that you can plug in at different stages of the funnel. So when you talk about multi-channel marketing, this is a product that kind of fits every stage depending on what you try to convey, right? It's a perfect tool for brand awareness, but it's also a perfect tool for remarketing. It's even a perfect tool for the purchase stage. A lot of what we do, for instance, here at White Shark, is when you come on board, we have a couple of videos that we send your way so you understand the tools, you meet the team, you have the right expectations. So having video as part of the different stages of the funnel can be extremely successful, and it's a tool that you can use all around, right? And in terms of training, I mean, if you're in this world, you probably know that training is almost a given. Basically through your entire lifetime in digital marketing world, training is a component that we have to pay attention to basically throughout the entire year, because there are so many changes in the networks and there's so many changes in the channels that we work with, that if you want to successfully roll out a multi-channel strategy, you're going to have to constantly update yourself. If you have a strategy in place that's working, there might be a new channel or a new product or a new opportunity that you could plug in to improve it. But if you're not constantly receiving that training and putting attention to what's coming out, you might miss out on that. So that's fundamental as well. And I think, again, talking about 2020 and the new normal, it is a key element that you're up to date and up to speed with everything that's happening if you want to be successful and you want to be able to navigate the waters, right? And I think that ties in perfectly with 2020, right? And what we learned in 2020. I think it was a huge learning experience for all of us. And one key component that ties here to multi-channel marketing is the importance of multi-channel marketing in situations like a 2020 pandemic. The importance of having different channels available, the importance of having the flexibility available to shift budgets around, to shift strategy, to quickly change things, and not necessarily just relying on one channel or one product only, right? We've seen some channels struggle with regulations and issues with data privacy and things of the sort in the past and also recently. So maybe fully relying on a single channel can be risky, especially if you have a big budget or most of your revenue is tied to paid advertising. So having the flexibility and understanding the importance of multi-channel marketing is key. Also understanding that if retail and e-commerce was a thing before 2020, it's now 10 times more important because a lot more people are actually using websites and are going through digital path to purchase products, right? So understanding that you have to be present in the digital world is even more important now, because a lot of people, like Mauricio said earlier today, are doing everything from their phone and their computer at home. If you think of how things change in terms of home office and how things change in terms of people working from home, a lot more people are using desktop computers, for instance, compared to what was happening before. Before, a lot of people were on the move. A lot of them worked off maybe their iPad or their tablets or their phones, but being at home made them actually stick to their desktop computers that maybe they weren't using in the past. This might seem like a silly change, but if you think of behavior and marketing, this is extremely important, because if you have a multi-channel strategy and you have a specific strategy in place for each channel, this means that you might have to shift all the focus that you had on mobile devices and now rethink your strategy for a desktop user or an enhanced desktop user. And where the tricky part comes into play is that the channel that might work for mobile might not necessarily be the best channel for a desktop experience, because they don't have the same market share, they don't have the same experience, and they don't behave the same way as well. Especially if you're talking about inbound channels where people are actually looking for information. The desktop experience can be completely different from one channel to another. So Facebook might behave differently on desktop computers versus mobile. We know that it's a heavy channel on mobile devices, but how is really the desktop experience for Facebook nowadays in terms of paid ads, right? So having all of that in mind and tying that to how things are changing, I think it's extremely important. And obviously tying that to consumer trends and being fully aware of what's happening and what's changing. And nowadays we're thinking of, working at home being the new normal as well. So this isn't temporarily. So if you took an approach that you felt was going to be temporarily, this is the time where you're going to sit down and think, okay, maybe I have to set this in stone and set this as the main strategy moving forward, because it's very likely that most of my customers are not necessarily going to go back into the office at all, for that matter. Maybe not just in the short term, but maybe this is going to be a thing. Microsoft is a perfect example. You guys are still working from home. Most of the big companies out there are keeping the work from home rule or option open, permanently. Some of them are enforcing it, so some of them are not necessarily going back to the office at all and not even making it an option, right? So all those things that affect our behavior in the day-to-day life also affect your customers and how they purchase products. The brick and mortar experience, right? Before, you would go into a shop to see your product and see what the product was about, compare it, try it on. Maybe you're talking about a pair of shoes, etc. That's been changing in the past 2 or 3 years. And with the pandemic, this was just accelerated. If you go into a Nike store, for instance, there's a lot less selling of shoes, but a lot more of the experience of the brand. So you go and they have a basketball court. So you're no longer just seeing a shoe, you're trying it on and you're playing basketball. Or you have a soccer court indoor, so you have a a treadmill so you can run with the shoes. So now the actual brick and mortar experience isn't just for you to go on and try to shoe, but there is an extra added value and an extra experience for you to see that differently. We discussed this in the past about the issue with the auto industry and the furniture industry. The brick and mortar experience is completely different now. Now you have virtual showrooms. Now you have test drives that you can book from home and the car actually goes to you. So rethinking all of that and understanding those changes, it's what's going to set the wrong foundation when you want to talk about multi-channel marketing approach and selecting the channels, right, that are right for each one of those stages and the new stages that are to come.
Yeah, those have been game changers for me, at least, especially even at a very core level. What's their return policy? And, if I try something at home, can I send it back with the same packaging? Like, that's been huge for me in terms of my own path to purchase for some clothing, and then being able to buy online and then pick up at the store, right, or on the curb. So there's so much flexibility now that people are testing out and they're finding to work. And I think it's been really interesting that that value proposition has been put up to the front, and it's really made the difference, right? Like, I'm more loyal now to some brands that I probably didn't pay attention to as much in the past, but it was some tweaks that they made from my experience that have made me believers. And so, yeah, I'm all in. And I think, when we all come out of this, it's going to be a different mix of this world. We're not going to boomerang back to the way it was. So I think, the excitement too is also being able to go up to your advertiser and maybe sit at the drawing board and try to figure out, like, what is your unique twist as well too that can stand out above the competition.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great year as well for us in the digital marketing world, because we're being forced to be a lot more creative as well. And that's resulting in a lot of positive changes in the industry as well. So I think that overall, this has pushed us maybe out of our comfort zone, but we're developing new products and new opportunities that at the end of the day will result in better performance for our clients, right? So we have 5 minutes left, and we have some questions down the line. So we want to tackle those before we wrap the presentation up. I'm going to be reading the questions right now. Let's see if we can get 2 or 3 here. One of them is, how do we know which channel or channel combination is the right one for a particular vertical? That's a pretty good question. Mauricio, do you want to tackle that one? You want me to take it?
Well, I guess I could start it off and then I can hand it off. I would say always start on Microsoft Ads, right? I would say, look, that's in part true, right? Look, start with search, right? Like, search basically is going to be where, like, how would you search for your product? And I think, look, put yourself in the center of the advertiser, right? But I think paid search is a really great place to start. Again, being present on Google, you have to do that. Being present on Microsoft Ads, you have to do that. Facebook, you got to be on that. Does it make sense for your business? Also make sure to, of course, right? Like, make sure to look at your business. What's the presence look like? What's your web presence look like, right? How are people landing on your site? How are they converting your site? How would you call someone for your product, right? So really put yourself in that seat, and at a base core line, take advantage of all the free things that are available to you to be listed, on Google Places, on Bing Places, on Facebook Places, and look at the traffic that's coming in from that. You have to start looking at, like, what are those numbers shaking out to, and then how do you start increasing your investment on a PPC side. Start learning on how people are searching for you and how they're landing on your site, and then look at that data, like, sift through it, right? Like, are they coming from mobile? Are they coming from desktop? Are they coming from a particular location? Are they coming from a specific time? And that'll help you sort of understand, like, how do I start dialing up visibility during those times, during those devices, and during those physical locations. And that's from one sort of core base search level. Frank, I'm sure I'm missing out on a couple of different other visible places, but
yeah, I mean, I think I think most verticals have like a basic starter kit, right? Like, if you're a local business, you probably want to do obviously some branded approach, both search networks. You probably want to have Bing Places and Google My Business set up. So for a lot of verticals, there's kind of a blueprint already. But I think one key aspect is, and especially if you want to scale PPC as a product, you're an agency, you're trying to be as successful as you can with your customers, it's investing in a market research team. Part of the reason why we grew our own market research team is because our partners had a lot of, they had a lot of necessities tied to that. They were starting with the product and they wanted to just learn more on what they could offer to a client, right? And that takes time and that takes resources. Our market research team is one of the biggest teams here at Whiteshark, and we make it available to partners so that we can take that off their hands, because we know it's hard work. Building a proposal and making sure that the channels that you selected are going to actually bring the results that you want. It requires that you do competitor research, requires that you do keyword research, requires that you do some brand analysis as well, requires that you kind of take a deep dive and an x-ray of your brand and your customer. And that takes time, but it's actually something that's going to probably set the right foundation for your clients. So having a market research expert on your team, or having a market research expert on the agency that you work with, I think it's going to be key. Because I think it's a case-by-case scenario, regardless of the blueprint that you have. I think it's gonna depend a lot on the specific location you have, how long your website has been running, because if you're just brand new, you might not be able to do remarketing from the get-go, but if you have years worth of data, then you can, etc. So I think it's going to depend on that, but having a solid market research to start the process, I think it's gonna be key. Let me take one more question before we wrap up. What has been the most challenging part of improving the experience for your client in terms of client journey? I can start with that one because we've been through a long path in regards to this particular topic. Whiteshark's been around for almost 10, 11 years now. And we've learned a lot, right? We've learned a lot. We had stages during our lifetime where we struggled with the client service and how we were servicing our customers and their expectations versus the added value that they perceive they were getting from us. I can tell you that the first thing that you need to do and you need to invest time and resources on is listening to your customers. So picking up the phone and asking them how they feel about your service, how they feel about the expectations they had versus what they're being delivered, and the added value they're perceiving is probably the most important part. We invested a lot on having a hefty and probably very advanced CSAT system here at Whiteshark to really keep our eye on the pulse, our finger on the pulse, and understand what's going on with our customers. And as soon as we enhance communication, it significantly changed the way we were doing things. Back in the day, we thought the way we were doing things was the right way to do it, but we weren't listening to our customers. When we did that switch, our satisfaction level increased significantly. We were actually pretty high up there when we compare ourselves with other agencies of our size in the market. And when our partners do CSATs across their customers, we rank high up because we're very, very proactive with communication. And the challenge is spending the time and the resources to listen to your customers, right? Being proactive about the phone calls, being proactive about the meetings, being proactive about sending the right information. I think it's key, and it's what's going to define really the level of experience that your customer is going to have with you, even regardless of the campaign performance, right? Customers can understand that not every month your campaign is going to perform at the level that they want. But if the experience, the communication, the actual service is on point, they're very likely to still stick with you because they trust you and they trust that you're looking for their best interest and that you're actually making the best use of their budget, right? Good. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I think we have 1 minute left. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I think as a matter of a wrap up, it's important to understand some of the things that we have on the screen right now, that you need to understand your client journey, that you need to deliver the right content for each one of the stages of those journeys. You need to spend time analyzing each one of those stages as well. And based on all that information, you need to prioritize the channels that make sense for you and for your customers. The more you become familiar with what's happening across the board and with these channels, the more likely you're going to be able to succeed. And more importantly, if you have tools available, if you can leverage a platform or a tool that can help you out, you can use, all the tools that Microsoft offers. We have tools for partners. Google has tools for partners. Go ahead and use them because they're going to save you time and they're going to help you be more efficient with your client budgets. So I think that's all we have for today. Like I mentioned, we're going to be sending the presentation to your email probably later today. For the ones that couldn't attend but signed up, they're also going to be getting the presentation as well. And if you would like to continue the conversation, you have any questions about multi-channel marketing or marketing in general, please feel free to reach out to Mauricio or myself, and we'll be glad to spend some time with you talking about it and talking about some of the things that we can do to help you out.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect,
Look
Mauricio.
forward
Thank
to
you
your
for your
questions
time.
and collaborating.
Thank you everyone for your time. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.